So welcome everyone to another episode of our podcast AdBites. This is where we lift the lid on all things Apple search ads. This podcast is brought to you by Redbox Mobile, an award-winning ASO and ASA company. I'm your host, Samuel Chorlton. I'm CTO at Redbox Mobile. And today I'm going to be joined by industry expert Sue Azari from AppsFlyer. And we're going to be discussing the value of Apple search ads for e-commerce apps. So Sue, thanks for joining us. Wouldn't mind giving us a little introduction? We can get started.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining this afternoon. So I'm Sue Azari. I'm the e-commerce industry lead at AppsFlyer, and we are a mobile measurement partner. My background is very much in e-commerce, so I've spent 10 years working for companies like Ferry Group, Mr. Porter, Net-a-Porter, working across digital marketing, CRM, and mobile marketing. And at AppsFlyer, I get to work with a wealth of amazing e-commerce brands across EMEA and LATAM on their app growth strategies, including the likes of Apple Search Ads.
Cool, brilliant, thanks Sue. So yeah, today's all about e-commerce apps, Apple Search Ads, how the two can interplay with one another. But I think what seems like a sensible place to start is really, I guess, looking into the background of e-commerce apps. So I guess from your perspective, Sue, what has been the evolution and growth of the sector?
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting because it's really gone hand in hand with how the usage of mobile phones has increased over time. I think a lot of e-commerce brands really started to then see a natural shift in consumer behavior towards mobile. So I'd say the average e-commerce brand now sees 80% of their transactions come via mobile, which is amazing. And with more people shopping online, it's made sense for a lot of e-commerce businesses to start looking at how they can offer a seamless mobile first journey, which is where apps come into play. And I think that not to look back too much at COVID, because I'm sure we want to forget about it, but COVID in particular massively accelerated the digital growth of e-commerce. And I think this is where an app really has an important role to play.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I've just had a little nudge from behind the scenes, but we do have a Q&A function running throughout the session. Feel free to post your questions at any point. We will kind of hopefully circle back to those at the end. But if they're particularly relevant, we can jump into them as we go through the session. So, yeah, I mean, so you've kind of talked about how there's been a big shift, I guess, from traditional kind of going to your website on your desktop PC to be much more kind of mobile app focused. Where do you think, I guess, some of the growth opportunities might exist for some of these e-commerce apps?
I have quite a long list in terms of opportunities. I think that there's a lot for them to go after. I think that they can really add a lot of value to their customer base through things like contactless payments via the app, saved wallets, biometric logins. There's also the addition of an extra marketing channel through push notifications via the app too. And I think for a business where they're trying to look for those incremental growth opportunities, those incremental gains, the advantage of a new channel really does offer that. There's also from feedback from customers that I've spoken to within the e-commerce space, apps really offer this enhanced customer loyalty. Most of the businesses that I speak to have said that the users who shop and use the app tend to have a much higher incremental LTV versus customers who shop on other channels. And a lot of that is due down to things like a slicker user experience. It's a more personalized customer experience. And I typically see a higher conversion rate to purchase too. So I think the opportunities that ultimately it's a new channel to drive revenue and retention.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, for anyone that's not clear, LTV, that's lifetime value. So that's the total, I guess, benefit economically that provides to the company in the longer term. I guess what's almost an interesting, I guess, point of discussion around that is that customer loyalty piece. I mean, we're all used to the more traditional version of where you've got your Tesco Club card and stuff like that. And I guess that's a kind of earlier format of that. Do you think in some senses we're kind of embedding that much within the kind of the wider, I guess, purchasing process than what might previously been utilized?
Yeah, I think actually the Tesco example is very interesting because they are actually going through a process of merging their club card and their transactional apps, which have traditionally sat separately, into one experience. And the idea is that I think, again, they're trying to bring together that transactional and that loyalty piece into one, rather than I think initially the reason for having them separately was to try and I guess the offline shoppers of having a separate experience with them, but they're trying to bring everything into one and actually encourage customers to shop across multiple channels and take those offline customers and try and shift them into purchasing in the app too. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I think that's a good example of actually where there's starting to be a bit more of a hybrid between both of those.
Well, I think it's definitely an example where a big brand like Tesco is seeing the power that other perhaps more recent and emerging brands have really gained that value from having that more cohesive offering. I guess that kind of leads us into one of the next bits I wanted to kind of touch on, which is who, from your perspective, does it really well, kind of using their e-commerce app.
I think that within e-commerce, I think that supermarkets do this really well in terms of, again, that I'm a big fan of that hybrid between offline and online. And they really focus on offering really engaging and useful in-app experience. So particularly with things like in-store navigation. I know that Asda launched a feature that would help people who are visually impaired in terms of actually how they would navigate around the store. And that's such, a great customer experience for somebody who has this very specific need. I think looking at the likes of Marks and Spencer's, like they have obviously the Sparks card from a loyalty perspective, which again you can use within store. But the app is now has a bit of a stronger role in store through Scan and Go. So again, you can use the app for transactions as you go throughout the store. And again, they're also launching the ability to do, I think, click and collect, and also to book fitting rooms as well via the app whilst you're in the store. So again, they're trying to create this very sort of circular experience between online and offline. I think that out of the supermarket subcategory, I think the Very Group has a really strong mobile first strategy, which, disclaimer, they're a former employer of mine, but they have a lot of app exclusive offers. So I actually got an email with one this week. And they've also recently launched augmented reality in their app specifically for trying on beauty products, which I think is really smart, because I think a barrier with buying cosmetics online is that if you buy something and you try it, you can't return it, obviously for hygiene reasons. So it's a great way to let users actually try on different shades and see if it suits them, and ultimately helps create a bit more of a frictionless user experience, and hopefully, I would guess, boost the conversion rates of their beauty products.
Have you actually tried any of those apps? Because I've always been slightly unclear about how good those augmented reality things are.
They're so good. I've actually tried Charlotte Tilbury, who doesn't have an app at the moment, but they have a fantastic augmented reality, and it's like scarily accurate in terms of actually how it looks on your face. So yeah, I think initially when it first launched, it was not quite right in terms of the lipstick, not quite sitting.
Yeah.
To do. But now I feel like it's really come a long way over the past couple of years.
So that's quite interesting to hear. So I mean, I guess you can kind of break e-commerce companies down into the traditional kind of bricks and mortars companies. Well, we're talking about the big supermarkets that most of them existed before mobile was even a thing, and then you kind of touched on some are much more mobile first. Do you tend to, from your perspective, see that the bricks and mortar are playing catch up with the mobile first companies, or something kind of different to that?
Yeah, they definitely are, to be honest. And I think part of the reason for that is particularly at a C-suite level of those traditional offline retailers who then come online, there's still a lot of education that's needed at that level within the business, which I think means that sometimes those bricks and mortar retailers have been a little bit slower to innovate. But saying that, I think that what I've seen a big growth of with the bricks and mortar stores is the use of things like QR codes in store to actually drive app store usage, and actually a lot more innovation within that space in terms of how they're used. So H&M as an example, they have QR codes all over their store, point of sale, changing rooms, and all of that directs users through to download the app so that they can collect points on their purchase with their member rewards program. So they're trying to think about actually what's that value exchange for the end user in terms of, okay, well, why should I download the app? And usually they get, I think, 15% off their first purchase, points on the purchase they can redeem for future orders too. So, but I still think that for some bricks and mortar retailers, some are still a bit unsure of the role that the app plays within their business. And I think that there's sort of varying levels of innovation in terms of how it's being used within the customer journey.
And are you seeing any of these brands that you're working with as trying to use it as a mechanism to kind of revitalize the physical stores, to try and encourage people not to always shop online, but to use some of the actual physical premises as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that what we've seen, or what we're starting to see definitely this year, is and I know it probably seems odd to speak about this in the context of app, but it is really relevant in terms of the growth of physical stores. So M&S, for instance, I think they're investing something like 140 million this year in the expansion of new stores, because there's been this growth in footfall post-pandemic, especially on local high streets where less people are going to the office and working more locally or at home. So there's been this revitalization of that high street, which is great. But to your point, actually, there's a socialization aspect now within stores, particularly for the Gen Z consumer. So Forever 21, they closed a lot of stores in the UK pre-pandemic. Now they're about to launch them again, and they're using the likes of TikTok to attract that Gen Z audience back into the stores. But what they are starting to do is to create more of an experience or concept-led store. And the app, so for instance, Gymshark, who is a client, they've launched their first store. They were traditionally just purely online, and the app, they've launched a big store on Regent Street, and the app is part of that in-store experience. So they have fitness classes which you can book through the app. I think you can pay through the app too. You can book fitting rooms through the app too. So again, they've been very conscious of, when building out that in-store strategy, how the app actually fits into that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. That, I mean, moving on, I guess, to the kind of the crux of today's conversation, which is looking around digital advertising, especially in with Apple search ads in the App Store. I mean, let's just start kind of at the basics, really. I mean, what do you see as kind of some of the common misconceptions or some of the common expectations around marketing in the App Store?
I think things that I've heard are that there's an assumption that you need like a really high budget to be able to run App Store marketing, which is in order to get success, that's definitely not always the case. And also that there's only a benefit from running brand term campaigns. So this is within the App Store, only bidding on your brand. So if you're M&S, you only bid on Marks and Spencer's, M&S, or variations of that. And again, that's not always the case, because there are definitely users, browsers within the App Store who are in like discovery phase. And there's also the opportunity to look at bidding on, say, competitor keywords too, and actually being able to take a share of their in-app store traffic as well. So I'd say that, yeah, those are sort of the two main misconceptions around budget, and also only running with brand terms.
So let's kind of start with the budget piece. I mean, we often get here at Redbox similar questions around this, like, what is the right budget? And it's almost an impossible question to answer, but let's have a go. How do you kind of approach that?
I think that budgets will always change according to objective, and obviously there are nuances based on your business in terms of, even from like a geographic location, in terms of the number of countries that you want to run Apple search ads across, because it is available across a wide amount of countries. I think the most important thing is being very clear on what your KPI is, and really that shouldn't just be cost per install. You should really be looking at actually what activity is driving profitable installs, and having sort of a baseline KPI against that. And then what that allows you to do is that if you're seeing, you know, a ROAS at a certain level of, I don't know, say 10, and you know, okay, that's the minimum threshold, that means that you can keep investing as long as it stays there or above. And that should really be sort of how you're working with your budgets. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think just spending a little doesn't mean you don't get any value out. You might not be able to access all the potential value that is available, but I think you're always better to put in a comfortable budget to start with and ascertain what that return looks like, and then build it out from there. So you're better to take a few $1,000s or pounds to start with, give it some time, see how quickly it spends, see what the return is, and then you can work out if 20,000, 200,000 is a more appropriate figure. But what you don't want to do is go in blind and not know what your potential kind of profit points are.
Right.
And I guess it's quite, I mean, you obviously work for one of the largest MMPs out there, MMP being Mobile Measurement Partner. What is the kind of importance of having an MMP in place? I mean, not everyone's going to have had one, not everyone's going to make clear what they are, but let's just kind of, I guess, start discussing that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So there are multiple benefits from a deep linking perspective. So being able to provide like these frictionless contextual user journeys. So if somebody has the app, ensuring that you're driving them through to the app and through to the right place within the app. And if somebody doesn't, driving them through to like a custom product page, perhaps, and then to the App Store. And then I think most importantly, as part of that, is being able to actually measure the impact of your campaigns. And especially if you're running quite a diversified media mix and have budget in different paid channels, as well as using your owned media channel. So by that, I mean, it could be the likes of email or SMS or web to app, being able to understand actually the part that all of these play at a user level from like a multi-touch attribution perspective. So actually, somebody might have seen a Facebook and a Google ad, but from a last touch perspective, actually what did drive that install, particularly with Apple Search Ads. So that's not integrated with your app SDK. So you can see top of funnel impressions, spend, number of installs, conversion rate to install. But to go back to that point around measuring profitability of those campaigns, you would need a mobile measurement partner, which would sit in between Apple Search Ads and your app SDK, to actually match what happens once that user installs the app. What do they go on to buy? And it helps you then unlock things like obviously return on ad spend, looking at things like lifetime value. And you can also, Apple Search Ads, be able to look at those metrics at a keyword level too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like knowing that somebody got to your website and then having no idea what happened to them afterwards if you don't have one. It's impossible to work out which parts are working and which aren't.
Yeah, and this is it. I think that you can look at things like cost per install, which is great, but then I think that you know, maybe you could see a £10 cost per install and think that seems quite high, but actually that could be theoretically delivering you a return on ad spend of maybe say £30-40, which might mean that actually that's a level that you're happy with. But without that visibility, you might then just go for low cost per installs. But what you're not seeing is actually maybe 90% of those users are installing the app immediately after like day one or day two. So you want to be able to see what that user journey is, retention rates, etc.
I think it's an important thing, I guess, to kind of note at this point, that your MMP is there to track the behavior of those that have been attained directly through advertisement. It's not to assess the behavior of every user of your app. There's different products that are available to do that side of things. That's correct, isn't it?
Exactly.
So I guess we're looking here at e-commerce apps, and I guess what from your side of things are the primary methods, I guess, that you see for promoting e-commerce apps? I mean, I guess we could talk on both traditional media versus kind of the digital push as well towards the App Store.
Yeah. So again, yeah, it depends on the maturity level of the business. We see the higher maturity e-commerce apps, they run with a diversified mix of channels, and that's across a mix of owned and paid media. From a paid media perspective, that can include like the bigger, what we call self-reported networks, obviously Apple being one of them, but then also expanding out of that into what we call demand side platforms too. But the idea is that they have this budget where they're able to flex it and be reactive based on the results that they're seeing across different campaigns and channel types. And the idea is as well that your customers will never just interact or see with you on one channel. For instance, what if they're not opted into email campaigns? What if they don't have Facebook or Instagram? So the idea is to be able to use multiple channel touch points. I'm really testing what works best. I said brick and mortar stores, they definitely rely on QR codes and offline marketing. But yeah, as I said, it's very much a broad mix is what we see works best.
And I guess part of that's down to kind of brand familiarization. The more channels that you're providing awareness on, the more chance you've got of some of those adverts starting to convert further down the line. It's unlikely that someone who sees one advert for a new company they've never heard of are immediately going to go, that's the thing I've always been looking for. You've got to kind of work at that customer to get that conversion.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess we're particularly interested here in the Apple App Store. What's that like for e-commerce apps?
I think it's really favorable for e-commerce apps because it's really the storefront from an app perspective for your app. And given that also, you know, within the app stores, there is a dedicated, obviously there's different categories available that you can search within, and also it's like so gaming, but shopping is also a category. So the app stores recognize that, you know, that is also a strong growth opportunity for them, and it's something they recognize that there's a whole wealth of apps that's like hundreds that sit within that category itself. So it's an opportunity for you to really showcase the best elements of your app to users who either might be familiar with your brand or not. And just because someone's familiar with your brand or maybe shops with your brand already on other channels, they'll still need education on actually what's the benefit to them of installing the app. And the App Store allows you to do that through, obviously you have App Store descriptions, and most importantly, visual assets in terms of video and static images that you can really showcase the best of what there is to offer from a product feature perspective. Also, I would say that it is a competitive space, but it does deliver very favorable ROAS or ROI. So yeah, obviously return on ad spend. And the reason for that is you're capturing a very high intent user within the App Store. There's somebody, if they're in the App Store, it means that they're much more likely to actually either have apps, use apps, want to download an app. So therefore the conversion rate to install tends to be highest within the likes of Apple search ads versus some of the marketing channels. So it might not deliver the same rate of new users as some, say, more paid social based channels, but it definitely acts as a stage of the funnel to help move users across to your app.
And so we talk a lot about intent with the App Store, and as for e-commerce as a vertical, how does that sit in terms of being kind of brand focused versus people looking for, I'm just looking for a clothing app, I'm looking for a makeup app? What's from your experience, the kind of separation between those two?
In terms of somebody who might just be looking for something generic versus very specific brands?
Yeah, in terms of volumes and stuff, like obviously not figures, but should the majority of traffic be expected to come through your own brand, or actually is there quite a large amount to access from those more generic terms?
Yeah, so what I've seen in the past is campaigns split into 4 categories. So brand, which is where I would say that is where the majority of installs would come from, but there's also competitor brand terms that you can bid on. It's recommended to have a generic campaign, so that might be for instance, bidding on terms like clothing or different department types within e-commerce. And then also setting up a discovery-based campaign. And this is obviously brilliant because Apple will mine keywords for you based on what ultimately things will perform well for your app. And if something is working well, you can then move that across to another campaign type, whether that's generic or competitor-based. But I think essentially, if I can go through the 4, definitely brand terms will take the most installs, but there are opportunities to drive incremental installs through App Store traffic, particularly from a seasonal perspective. So looking at, brand terms like Black Friday, for instance, consumers are also very price conscious at the moment. So I've seen a growth in keywords that are related to things like deals and coupons. There are ASO tools that can help you actually view keyword rankings and new keyword rankings too, so that you can test out what might work for your brand. I think that if you're a multi-brand retailer, so thinking about the Very Group, for instance, they stock other brands. So they actually have the opportunity to bid on those specific brand terms because somebody's searching for I don't know, going to say Nike, very also stocks that brand, and there's an opportunity through for them to actually bring that type of user who's looking for that brand into their app too, because obviously they also sell that product. So I would say don't just focus on brand terms. There is an opportunity to test outside of that.
I think that's the example with Nike and the Very Group is quite a good one. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but if you are offering product for Nike or offering products for potentially a competitor brand, custom product pages, which is a feature of Apple where you can show different assets depending on the search term, is absolutely ideal for that, because people may have never known that Very sold Nike, and you can make sure that your advert that might sit above the search at the top of the search term shows that you sell Nike, and that is a way that you could potentially win traffic purely because people weren't aware that that feature existed within your offering before.
Yeah, definitely.
So from your experience, I guess an important question to cover is, how do e-commerce apps succeed with Apple search ads, and why haven't they, from examples you've seen?
I think that where I've seen it maybe them not succeed is realize I'm biased in this, where they don't have an MMP, because it means that they're not able to actually look at the value or the type of user that's coming through various campaigns, and even from a keyword perspective. So again, a campaign might have a low CPI. That doesn't mean that it's driving a high value user or a highly retained user. And again, you want that visibility on what that keyword is doing to actually, once they come into the app, how it's influencing their purchase behavior too. So that's one point. I think also within a lot of businesses, like teams are very much stretched and really time poor, and it means that when it comes to optimizing campaigns or testing new elements, or being able to utilize all of the different campaign types available by Apple Search Ads, or the creative placements available too, I think that's a really big missed opportunity. And I think sometimes that is down to not having enough creative resource internally, but there's really fantastic placements available, as I said, from both video assets and static assets, even from a landscape perspective too. So I think being able to actually review and update those, I think not doing that is a missed opportunity. And again, as you said, custom product pages. So just being literally taking advantage of everything that has been provided for marketers to use to optimize their campaigns. And similarly, when it comes to keywords as well, actually not reviewing or optimizing those, or actually looking at outside of a brand term perspective, what the opportunities might be there. And one final point actually on that will be, especially if you're a global brand and you're running with, say, Apple Search Ads across multiple regions, is not localizing those campaigns by country too. So I've seen just examples of that, you're just copying across like a UK campaign and then setting it up for another region, and actually not taking into account the fact that competitors will be different. There might be different seasonal factors there too, and not localizing based on that.
Yeah, I think there's also the big point around, it's not you get your app on the App Store and your job is then done, because you've got to keep refreshing it, make sure it's reflective of the current offerings from your product. It'd be the equivalent of, you have a shop on Oxford Street and you never update your window display. People would not go into the shop after a while, because they go, obviously there's no new products for sale or whatever. So you've got to make sure you keep it fresh. CPP are an example of how you can trial out different offerings to see which ones sit well with your clients. But absolutely, if you can't track the value offering down to whether it's providing value into the business, how are you going to manage to convince your C-suite level that increased marketing budget is the right way to go forward? So yeah, completely agree with that in this space. Looking at some of the newer offerings from Apple, so we've got Today tab and product pages, sorry. Have you seen anything with respect to those in the e-commerce space yet?
Yeah, I think that From what I've heard, I tuned into Hannah Parvaz's session, and she gave some really great insights on custom product pages. I have seen some brands like try out the new Today tab ad, which isn't keyword, but it can be used to keyword based, but it can be used to engage a wider audience of potential customers. And I've heard some good things from that too. But yeah, I think that I've personally not used custom product pages, but I heard, as you said, from Hannah the other week, some really great stats from one of the growth clients that she works with, which is amazing. So after hearing that, it's something that I'm definitely speaking to e-commerce customers about and encouraging them to use it. I know actually there is Nike, who's one of our customers. I don't have results on it, but I saw that they had a really contextually relevant campaign for New Year's. So if you were to just search Nike, you would just get obviously the generic App Store assets, but they had a custom product page set up. Obviously in January, everybody's quite fitness mad and has aspirational goals around that. And they really leaned into that, and they actually around that sort of January sort of new fitness goal mantra, they had a specific campaign and custom product page set up against that and relevant keywords, which was great to see. Again, that really tied up user journey.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree, and I think some of the value adds of these will kind of come out in time, but I think getting that piece right around seasonality trends is hugely important. And I think, I guess I know we spoke the other day about Black Friday in particular being a really kind of important time around e-commerce apps. What's your kind of advice or thoughts around what best practice is for kind of succeeding around these events?
Yeah, I know. So I've mentioned it 4 times. Probably everyone's sick of hearing it now, but not just running brand protection campaigns. Actually, yeah, as you said, factoring in seasonality. So specific terms such as Black Friday shopping, Black Friday discounts, but looking at again using tools that allow you to see what specific keyword rankings are from a seasonality perspective, because it is an opportunity to capture additional installs within the app stores, and also factoring that seasonality into your creative approach too. Make sure that you are updating assets seasonally, or particularly if releasing new in-app features that might be seasonally relevant. So a really good example to look at is ASOS. So they always, from a seasonal perspective, update their app store icon for things like Valentine's Day, even Halloween, and even just from a brand touch point. I think it's a great way of being able to, it really fits with their brand identity too, in terms of who their consumer is. And I also, when I was at the Very Group, had A/B tested App Store icon update for Black Friday, and we did see an uplift in installs on the version of the App Store with the Black Friday icon, which was brilliant. So again, it's something that you can test and see if it's right for your brand. But again, I think that seasonality factor will also help ensuring that you stand out from a conversion rate to install perspective within the App Store too. If people are scanning through the shopping category and they actually can see, so Shein and I think Boohoo would add a Black Friday banner across their App Store icon. And again, that allows the consumer to see very, very quickly once they're scanning the App Store actually which apps might have a big Black Friday campaign, which might pull them into install.
And I guess looking at the Apple search ads side of things, it's all of the big e-commerce brands have huge amounts of information available to them about shopping trends in store if they've got in store, or online if they're online. And I guess an important thing to be conscious of is that you're safeguarding advertising budget to align with those times of year when you expect an uplift in sales. So assuming that you're going to get a completely even spend profile across the year is never going to happen. Around Christmas and all that, you're obviously going to get spikes, and making sure that you're able to respond to that and also prevent your competitors from taking potential customer share away from you. And I guess that's something that's do you tend to see from an MMP that the LTV of customers improves around seasonal trends or not?
No, but what we do see is a huge spike in reinstalls because there is this seasonal there is this seasonal behavior around users who will install an app during the time at which they want to browse or shop, and particularly during Black Friday, they'll use it for from a research perspective to actually compare, say, prices and different deals across apps. And I think that what that adds sort of additional value from a reinstall perspective is that again, users will have the app just for that particular time period uninstall, and maybe they'll reinstall it again. Maybe it's like Christmas sales, etc. So yeah, it tends to possibly drive more of a short-term customer during these seasonal aspects, because it tends to drive a very discount driven customer during that time.
And I guess how would you advise, I guess, a client to account for that, where the behaviors of those clients may be atypical from what they would see for the rest of the year, in terms of making sure that they're not overpaying for those customers or potentially missing out on them because they're not paying enough?
Yeah, so I would say that from an Apple Search Ads perspective, I talked about 4 different campaign types before. I have seen some businesses run with they'll set up a seasonal specific campaign, so that it's more easy for them to actually control and optimize very specifically a set of seasonal keywords, would be one piece of advice. And then also, it's ensuring that, you know, when you are bringing users in, that you are looking at the full funnel, and you are looking at obviously the metrics that I talked about from a ROAS perspective too, to ensure that you are running profitable campaigns. I think that during peak seasons, it does require, I think, that more daily management of actually going in and reviewing campaigns, given that there'll be so much more traffic through to your app stores. But I think what's really interesting that I'm starting to see more of a trend of is businesses start to invest in bringing users to their app over the summer months too, when actually things like CPIs do tend to be a little bit lower. So there'll still be, as you said, that fluctuation in spend during the peak shopping period, but actually looking at how they can bring through users who might not be so discount driven, and as you said, actually probably more likely to have a higher long-term value outside of the seasonal sort of peak Black Friday period as well, and then try and re-engage them through other channels during that, say, that Black Friday week. I guess
there's also some potential value if you normally work off a 7-day ROAS as your kind of return value. If you're looking at seasonal stuff, it may be worth also creating shorter ROAS periods with targets around those, where you might need to want to respond on a kind of higher regularity basis. And that will give you an ability to work out whether you should be spending more, spending less, and kind of whether you should fluctuate at those terms. And we don't see any of our clients generally doing that, but perhaps that is something that people might want to consider.
Yeah, it's a really great point, because like one thing that I've seen is a focus on, say, 7-day retention rate as a point that you optimize on, but the 7 days might seem, well, why is it only the 7 days that you're focusing on? But the idea is that acts as a proxy, given that if you can improve someone's 7-day retention rate, it's like that therefore their 30-day retention rate might be higher. So to your point, if you could work on a shorter window, which I agree, I've not really seen many people do, but I think it's such a great idea. I think that, yeah, that allows you to manage that spend a little bit more efficiently.
Brilliant. Right, I've got one last question for you, and then we'll try and jump on a couple of the Q&A bits before we finish. But I mean, this is a bit of kind of asking Sue the Oracle what your thoughts are, but what does the future of e-commerce apps look like for you?
Yeah, big question. I think that what I've started to see, which makes me very happy, and I think it's quite interesting, is that we will see more e-commerce businesses that don't yet have an app launch one, because there are still quite a few, and quite a few even at like an enterprise level, that don't have an app yet. And just from some initial conversations that we've had within the industry, that's definitely something that we'll see more of this year, which is great. And a lot more focus on loyalty-based apps. I know we talked about Tesco, talked about M&S, the Sparks card too. But Asda, the middle of last year, they launched a separated loyalty-based app for use online and in store, and that was the fastest growing app within the shopping category in the UK. I think they had over 5 million downloads, which is huge. So again, I think we'll see more of that focus on from a loyalty perspective too. I think maximizing the event opportunities within the App Store too. I think it's something that I've seen a few e-commerce businesses do, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Again, really focusing on all that wealth of touch points that are available. So, you know, tailoring like product pages through CPPs, and being able to use all of the new placements that are available there. I think also focusing on being digital first, which should always sort of be the standard, but I think it's something that's become even more of a focus this year. But also alongside that is how the app can play a role within the offline experience. So very much a focus on in-app experience themselves and the role that they play within a physical environment. And then lastly, like one of my favorite topics at the moment is utilizing iOS widgets. So very much anybody that doesn't know about these, you're probably mostly familiar with them with the likes of weather apps or travel apps. So you can customize your home screen on an iPhone, and you can have anything that would update in real time. So again, it would be like weather updates, as I said. But I'm seeing more e-commerce apps like Mr. Porter, Net-a-Porter, and Decathlon are working with iOS widgets to enhance the app experience without ever having to actually go into the app. So they'll show a rotated carousel of new products, which is a great way, again, to be able to interact with your app users, but in a different way. And it's fantastic for retention too.
Brilliant. I guess, just very quickly on that, why do you think the widgets are preferable over just traditional notifications?
So notifications can, to some users, feel intrusive, given that, you know, when your phone's locked, for instance, and you see notifications coming up, and that can feel like a disruption of somebody's time. Whereas a widget, a user would have to consciously customize their home screen or their lock screen and say, okay, actually, alongside my weather app, I would like to see the Mr. Porter app here. And that when I open my phone, I can just see at a glance new products that I might like. So it's almost like, to your point around, it's almost like being able to window shop.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more in the background. But again, the user has to very consciously decide that that's something that they want. And push notifications are quite limited in text and image that's available. And you don't necessarily get to choose when the brand chooses to send them to you. Whereas the widget, it's a bit sort of a quieter way of being able to market, and it's an extension of the in-app experience as well.
Brilliant. Right, we've got a couple of minutes left, so let's see if we can get through a couple of these questions. I think a question from James around, do you think fast fashion apps will see decline? And I guess from what this says, and an uptick in secondhand and sustainable apps like Vinted will grow. What's your kind of thinking around that?
Yes, definitely. There was a report from Data AI that it was a view of the whole of 2022, and within shopping apps as a subcategory level, the fastest growing type of apps were buy now, pay later and marketplace apps. So the likes of Vinted was, I think, the second fastest growing app in the UK. And there's also an app called Twig. So a user can upload something to Twig, and Twig actually buys it off them and gives the user money directly. So rather than see like consumer to consumer, the consumer sells to the business. So anything that, I think that says a lot about the mindset of consumers within the UK at the moment, that both those types of apps are definitely growing. But from a sustainability perspective too, I think that's why people are starting to shop more with marketplaces, not just because it's cheaper. And actually, I think what could help fast fashion apps grow and to mitigate that decline is if they move into sustainability. So M&S, for example, has partnered with a rental platform, and you can rent clothes through them. I think French Connection's done that as well. So I think we'll start to see a lot of fashion brands move into that space.
I think there's also I think there's going to be a trend over the next few years with more of a leasing based purchasing model as well, with a kind of, especially with technology and electronics, where you don't actually own the product, you give it back at the end in a similar way to cars. Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see how stuff like that pans out over the next couple of years. But last question from Anonymous. Someone doesn't want to be known for this question, but we've mentioned brand versus non-brand on Apple search. If loyalty is driving installs, then is it not going to be heavily brand led?
It will definitely skew towards brand terms from what we've seen, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity to rather there is an opportunity to gain installs outside of brand terms, because as I said, there'll be certain types of users within the App Store who might be, for instance, the Nike and Very example, they'll be brand loyal, but they might not be loyal in the sense of where they buy that brand from, and actually have the opportunity to capture that App Store traffic and direct them through to you. So it does definitely depend on your business model. But again, thinking from a seasonality perspective, again, there's definitely opportunities there to drive incremental installs through those types of search terms.
Brilliant. Right, we won't keep any more of everyone's time, but thanks ever so much for joining us, Sue. That was really insightful.